What is going on, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the Unstoppable Dad Project. Thank you for joining us either on the podcast or if you're watching us on YouTube. I appreciate you and your time and helping us out by spreading the word on this podcast. So as always, if you're able to jump on, like, share, subscribe, like all our social media pages, share it around with any of your friends and help us grow this thing, help us grow this podcast and help us get the information out to hopefully a whole bunch of people that will see some benefit from what we're providing here, whether it just be the discussions, it be me talking through some of my thoughts on particular topics, and hopefully you guys are able to get some actionable bits of information from the episode that will help you out in your daily lives as a dad, as a husband, as a father, as a partner, whatever position you're in. I hope that you see some benefit from what we're doing here. So today's topic, and something that I've been, I feel personally I've struggled with quite a bit over the years, and it's balance. And it's finding balance within my life to basically spend enough time on all the things that I feel I need to spend time on. And it's not just something that I know I struggle with. I know it's something that in general most people struggle with. They struggle with the thought of balance and finding true balance in their life. And I know that for me, whenever I've really focused on what I'm doing and where I'm allocating my time, and then if I start focusing on how far away from maybe where I want to be from a time perspective I am on something, I know in the past it has caused me quite a great deal of anxiety is maybe not the word, but let's use that because it's easily understandable. And it probably is mild anxiety around that. It's maybe a little bit of FOMO, like fear of missing out. Like, am I doing enough? Fear of like inadequacy around, maybe not feeling like I'm being the best husband or father because maybe I'm not spending as much time as I would like with them because my time's getting drawn into something else. But there's always all these thoughts and what can be sometimes negative emotions and negative feelings around, I guess, someone's search for balance, trying to find that true middle line between spending enough time on yourself, spending enough time with your family, spending enough time, with your wife, and then spending enough time professionally on the things you want to do. And they're probably three of the main areas that a lot of people, you know, have to have in their life: family, professionally, and then personally. And then there's other things outside of that as well. Like there's friends and family there's friends and extended family that have to come into it. But if we're looking at it purely from like a father's point of view and from like where I've struggled, I've always struggled with, and I've spoken about this on the podcast before, like my number one priority has always been my family. And obviously tied into that, there is an element of professionally I have to be doing enough to provide for the family, because as a husband and as a father, that's obviously one of my key roles in that dynamic, where I have to make sure I am providing them with shelter and food and all those things as well. So they're two aspects. And then from there, obviously there's a lot of stuff that comes in around me being physically capable, wanting to actually physically and mentally capable. So for me, like my time away is doing jujitsu, it's training. Like that's not only something that's going to make me better physically, it also helps me from a mental standpoint, keep my mental space in a space where I can actually be a better husband and father. And there's always this balancing act between, these three things. And then there's spending time with friends, there's spending time with extended family. The unfortunate reality of a lot of this is for me, I'm getting close to 40. So my parents are getting older. They don't live close by. So, wanting to spend enough time with them, like all these things have weighed in on my mind and on my thought about how am I able to find balance? Like, and the one thing that I have just come to the conclusion of is balance is a myth, because there are going to be times in your life where you are going to need to push to the extreme in certain aspects of your life. So whether that be professionally, like for us, where we're in that position as a business owner, like if things aren't going well from a business point of view, I have to spend more time in the business. That is just the reality of it. And I've just come to the conclusion that that is part of it. And when I do that, then I have to be able to draw that time from somewhere else, whether that be from my training time or whether that be from my family time. And then what will happen is you invest the time into the one thing, and then all of a sudden, maybe you don't need to invest so that that time can go back into that thing that you've detracted from. Or it might be, it might be a passion. Maybe it's something like, I'll use an example that's happened in my life. And this is one of the things that I've agonized over. No, I won't say agonized. It's probably not the right word, but I've kind of thought over the last couple of, probably this calendar year, right? Like competing in jiu-jitsu, competing in a sport. It's something I do enjoy to do, but I also know that I know the way mentally what I need to do from a preparation standpoint, from a physical preparation standpoint. And I know that in order to do that, like in order to train jiu-jitsu 5-6 days a week, and then also do some strength work to complement that, I know the time commitment, and that time commitment has to come from somewhere else. And that in the past has been from what I've done within the business. And then if the business isn't at a point where I can do that, I have to look at that goal and go, well, maybe that's not achievable right now, because I can still do my training and I still prioritize time for that, but maybe it's not as much as I want to. And the thing is, when it comes to balance, and I guess the conclusion I've came to over the last few months, it's probably not even months, it's probably years, and why I say that balance is a myth is, if you imagine you've got four main priorities. I know I mentioned three, and I know those three for a lot of people are very, especially dads, are pretty well spot on from all the dads I've worked with and talked to. So you've got family, you've got health, and you've got professional, whatever that looks like. And then say, for example, you got friends and extended family outside of that. And if you imagine there's a square, and if you're watching this on YouTube, I'm making nice little hand gestures with what's going on. And on each of those things are on each corner of the square, and they're all interconnected. And let's say each of those corners are on an axis, and that axis extends out way past the edge of the square. And the end of the axis is like this, the axis that each is on is the amount of time. So in order to keep it a symmetrical square, you've got finite amount of time in a week. We've all got the same amount of time in a week. That's just the way it is. And if I have to put more time than what I am putting in now into my work life, I'm going to start to pull that out from where it is as a symmetrical square out to the edge of that axis. And what's inside the square is the amount of time we've got. So the amount of area that is within inside that square has to stay the same. So if I start pulling out one edge, then it means one of the other four edges has to retract. So I have to start taking that time away from somewhere else. And the thing is, I mean, I guess the thing that that really got me and where I would get some anguish around like finding balance is, I kind of refused to accept that that was the point. I thought I could do more and more and more and more. And what I was finding was, by doing that, I was actually doing less and less and less and less, because I didn't understand inherently that there's only so many hours in a day. And you can create time depending on what it is through being more efficient and effective with your time, and from a business point of view, creating systems and things like that. And that's a topic for another time. But we're talking about the time that you put into the things that you need to do, regardless of systems and other things that are in there. And as soon as you start pulling out to the extreme on one thing, it means that the time has to come from somewhere else. And what would cause me some real anguish around trying to find balance within my life was the fact that I just refused to accept that I needed to stop spending time on here in order to spend more time here. And then what I would find was by doing that, I would almost dig myself this hole where instead of having this much time to work, this square would contract on all sides because it just got consumed by thinking and not actually doing what I needed to. So from the point balance, I guess it depends on how you look at it, because you could say, and I probably right now, I feel like I've got a pretty good balance. However, I do still feel like should be spending more time on certain things. But I've kind of set myself up with a schedule and a routine where I'm happy with where I'm at for this part of my life. And that will change. I will either have to dive more into the business or one of the businesses that I'm working on, which means I'll have to detract some time from somewhere. Now, that doesn't mean you have to stop doing things. Like, don't misunderstand what I'm saying. It just means that maybe you have to be smarter with the way you spend your time. So, i.e., those people who are maybe busy professionals who have been finding it hard to prioritize time for their health, it doesn't necessarily mean if you start to need, if you really can't find any time, so you really believe you have no more hours in the day, and if you're struggling to do that, there's some other podcasts that I've done where I've talked about some tools and some tactics that you can use to actually give yourself a time audit and have a look at, because I don't necessarily believe that's always the case. I think maybe it's an effective, you got to look at how effective that use of your time is. However, then you've got to maybe look at some other things you can take that time from. And it's like that square, right? If you're already on the extreme on one thing and you need to add something else back in, we can't change the amount of time that's within that square. And to do so is futile, and it's going to cause anguish and anxiety around certain things that you could have time for. But by doing this, you're just spinning your wheels and you're detracting from the time. So, the thing is, and I guess the whole point of what I wanted to do, what I wanted to kind of talk about with this podcast is balance is great to try and seek and try and find. I truly don't believe you are ever going to find true balance in what you're doing. The reason being is we are always going to need to change and adapt to what we have in front of us. It is never going to be, if you're the type of person that is always striving to be better, and I think once, even if you were before kids, or maybe you weren't before kids, but I think once children start coming into the mix, we all want to be better. We want to be better for them. We should want to be better for ourselves, but as well as want to be better for them. But when you start to understand that they take in and they see more than you know and more than you understand, then I think you want to be better because you want to set a better example. I know I do. And I know a lot of people that I work with do. That's why they're trying to better themselves. But when you start wanting to better yourselves and you start wanting to move things forward, you're always going to look at it like, how can I maximize my time? How am I going to find true balance? And I personally don't believe you ever do that. And it wasn't until I came to peace with that fact that I actually felt happy with where I was at and how much work I was doing with particular things. And where I am now, I feel like I'm spending a good amount of time in the business. I feel like I'm spending a good amount of time with my kids and with my wife, and I'm feeling like I'm spending a good amount of time on my health. Now, may not be overall the amount of time I would like to do on my health. Like, I would like to be training more, but I'm sacrificing a little bit of that because I'm building more stuff within the business. And for me, like, that number one priority and that number one non-negotiable has always been that family time. So I'm not going to sacrifice that for anything else. There may come a time where I have to sacrifice that in order to, maybe propel a business to the next level or whatever the case might be. But because that's my number one priority, that is almost, if we talk about that square again, that priority is fixed on that axis. And then understanding that the other things for me, I can move around. I can move around the time that I'm spending on the business. I can move around the time that I'm spending training. And as I said, that doesn't mean I'm not doing that stuff, but understanding how much time I've got and how much time I need to do, and then the priorities, because the family, being the family man and the time is important, and number one, but then also providing for my family feeds into that number one goal. So when I sit down and I have to look at time and the time that I've got available, then maybe the time has to come out of, say, the training time to put it into the business, because that business feeds into the family, because that's what provides for us. It puts a roof over our head. It puts food on the table. And there'll be times where maybe business is going really well and maybe I don't need to spend as much time in it. So I can spend more time on training because maybe that's what I want to do at that point. And there's always going to be times where you will be able to move those things around. It's never fixed, which is why I am of the opinion that you will never find balance. But as long as you're searching and you're trying to be better and you understand that, and you accept the fact that we will do what we can with the time that we've got. We're always constantly trying to maximize our time, but understanding that balance is never really going to be achieved. It's adaptable. It's not fixed, is going to be something that for me has really helped me out mentally with that feeling of I'm not doing enough. Because once you understand what your priorities are and how they fit within your value system and your life, then you can start to prioritize where you're going to put that time aside. And that's been one of the biggest journeys for me, specifically over the last almost 6 years now, since we've had our daughter, where I wanted to make sure that I'm spending enough time with her and now my son, but I'm still doing enough to be an effective business owner, still learning, like education as a coach, still doing the stuff that I need to from a fitness and a health point of view to prioritize that. It doesn't necessarily, and there's all these things that you can shift around within each of those values. But if you're constantly anguishing over the fact that you don't feel like you have balance in your life, what it led me to and what it's led a lot of people to is that inaction. And as I've spoken about over and over and over again, inaction can be crippling and it becomes like quicksand, where it then just feels like it piles up onto you. You're getting sunk in, and it can get to a point where it feels damn near impossible to get out. And that's not where we want to be as fathers, as men, as human beings. We want to be constantly taking action and moving ourselves forward. And I think for some of us, when we're in that constant pursuit of perfect balance, that can be something that just becomes self-feeding and self-fulfilling to the point where we don't get anything done. So the thing that I wanted to talk about is balance. Balance for me is a myth, and it is something that most people will never be able to find. I can't find it, but what I can find is by working out what my priorities are and then allocating my time appropriately. So I am doing a little bit of everything, but I'm allocating my time to the most important things, and understanding that true balance is going to move. It's going to and it's never going to be the same. That's been one thing that's really helped me out. So if you're in that position, sit down, write down what you feel your major priorities are. I'd say if you're a dad, you're listening to this, you're watching this, like your family is going to be number one. For most of us, it is. But then if you're struggling to find time to do other things, go back, listen to the previous podcast about, trying to go through, setting things up. We've done a video in our private Facebook group, which is attached to our Facebook page, where I actually go through some tools that you can use to do a little bit of a time audit on yourself and try and build out that time for maybe something that you're not doing. But I mean, stop trying to search for that perfect balance, because it's not going to exist. It needs to be malleable. It needs to move around. It's going to change. And there's going to be times in your life where you can spend more time in the gym, but there's going to be other times in your life where you're going to be short on time. You can still do it, but your time is a finite resource that needs to be allocated somewhere else. All right. Hopefully that helps. Balance, eh? Let me know your thoughts. Email us, hit us up on Facebook, comment on the post if you're, on the YouTube page. Let us know what you think. As I said at the start, like, share, subscribe, share this around, help us get this message out, help us, get this podcast out and these pages out to hopefully some people that need it. All right. Thank you. Have a great week. See you next week. Bye.